Please rise as you are willing and able for our hymn from the Gray Hymnal 303, We Are the Earth, Upright and Proud. We bid you welcome. In this community of radical inclusion, we make space for what you believe and what you love. Your whole self is welcome here. In this community of open-hearted inclusion for all people, we do not expect you to think a certain way or restrict yourself to one set of beliefs. We only ask that you try to live a kindly, helpful life with the dignity proper to a human being. Welcome all who believe that religion is wider than any sect and deeper than any set of opinions. Welcome all who might find in our friendship strength and encouragement for daily living. We are so grateful that you are here. My name is Jessica Sanchez, and I am your service leader today. My pronouns are she, her. Thank you for spending your Sunday morning with us, whether you are enjoying the service in person or watching online. Today, we are fortunate to have guest speaker Jaike SpottedWolf through the Michigan UU Social Justice Network in our pulpit. I'll tell you a little bit more about her later in the service. I'd like to extend a special welcome to any visitors today. After the service, we invite you to stay for coffee and conversation downstairs in our reception hall. Please take a moment now to silence your phones, but we encourage you to share your presence with us on social media. The fundraising committee is hosting a used book sale today in Adams Hall downstairs after the service. So while you're enjoying your coffee, please peruse some great books and see if you can find something you'd like to take home. Regardless of the outcome of the upcoming election, there will be work to be done. Please join the Save the World group on October 20th at 7 p.m. in Adams Hall to watch and discuss The Deciders, which is a film about how to address the wealth and money issues underlying so many of the country's problems. The UUCF Superheroes themed service auction is happening on Saturday, November 16th. We hope it's on your calendar. If it isn't, here are top reasons why you should attend. It's the biggest party of the year and our biggest fundraiser. For your $25 registration fee, you are fed a delicious dinner and the opportunity to bid on terrific items. There's something for everyone to bid on. You can even dress up if you want. Which superhero will you be? For more announcements, you can check our website or our e-blasts about any additional upcoming events or goings-on that are happening here. Our chalice lighting today is by Sherry Woodbury, In Our Circle Again. Here we are in our circle again, a circle of vision and reflection, a forum for deciding and empowering. Here we are at the base of another bridge, another space spanning the shores of today and tomorrow, beckoning us to cross the chasm one day at a time. Here we are gathered again at the cusp of the future, at the boundary that holds community together. We are here in a circle of love and trust, brought to this moment by a series of choices and promises, by hope and gratitude, by our own shadows faced and befriended. With a servant's heart, with a leader's listening, with a parent's love, truer than all our inner trembling, let us model the health we seek for all and lean into community. Somewhere out there, all we dream is possible. Somewhere in here, we are sowing the seeds. Please join me in reciting our UUCF mission statement, which can be found in your order of service. We seek answers everywhere, include everyone, and live with compassion. So we're going to take a moment just to kind of sit and listen. Our meditation moment is called If We Listen by Reverend Darcy Lane. Listen. If we listen, we may hear the joys of the people around us. We may hear the concerns of our community. We may hear sorrow in a voice that breaks. We may hear a laugh hiding behind words. If we listen, we may hear the sounds of life around us. We may hear the creatures with whom we share these grounds. We may hear the engine hum of airplanes or cars, of strangers and neighbors traveling. We may hear the whistle of wind, the tumbling of leaves. If we listen, we may hear the sounds of the company of people. We may hear the coughing and sniffling of seasonal colds. We may hear the breathing of those nearby. We may hear the sigh of a body letting go. We may hear the wiggle and restlessness of sitting, the shuffle of paper and purse and hymnal. If we listen, we may hear ourselves. We may hear our own joy and laughter and sorrow. We may hear our own humming and tumbling. We may hear our own breathing. We may hear our own longing. Listen. Please remain seated for our meditation song from the Gray Hymnal, 112, Do You Hear?
In the vale of the main.
like that song too. Our reading today is called On Turning. Now is the time for turning. The leaves are beginning to turn from green to red and orange. The birds are beginning to turn and are heading once more toward the south. The animals are beginning to turn to storing their food for the winter. The leaves, birds, and animals, turning comes instinctively. But for us, turning does not come so easily. It takes an act of will for us to make a turn. It means breaking with old habits. It means admitting when we have been wrong. And this is never easy. It means losing face. It means starting all over again. And this is always painful. It means saying, I'm sorry. It means recognizing that we have the ability to change. These things are hard to do, but unless we turn, we will be trapped forever in yesterday's ways. Jaike SpottedWolf is an Assiniboine and Hidatsa Lakota, enrolled in and supported by the Mandan, Hidatsa, Sanish tribes of North Dakota. Jaike's family resides on the Fort Peck Reservation in Poplar and Forsyth, Montana. Jaike is an organizer, writer, speaker, and frontline water protector, establishing their activism in Coast Salish territory and occupied Duwamish territory of the PNW of Turtle Island. Jaike led marches through the streets of Seattle with fellow organizer Colby Williams and Danny LeClaire, speaking on Indigenous Erasure and genocide. In the summer of 2021, Jaike moved to northern Minnesota and resided mostly at Camp McGeezy during the Line 3 campaign to shut down Enbridge. There, Jaike built a fundraising team, bringing in over $25,000 worth of funds to cover food, winter supplies, and building materials to fortify the infrastructure of Magese. Jaike operated as a project manager in that space, working with the white accomplices and Native comrades to build facilities that would keep the camp sustainably running as a decolonization space and cultural center long after the Line 3 battle ended. Jaike helped institute recovery meetings for individuals struggling with their sobriety as they fought the police and community violence that occurred on Line 3. Jaike is currently living in Waiwayatanong, Detroit, Michigan, working to solidify Native sovereignty and Black liberation as a grant writer and social justice reformer. Jaike is a co-founder of the Tchitila Collective, and in that capacity has facilitated talking circles and decolonization talks within the city. The Tchitila Collective was founded in December of 2021 by water protectors who were all active during the Line 3 movement in Minnesota during the summer of 2021. The organization is focused on dispersing mutual aid to Native and Black Americans and anyone who might need help not fitting those categories, who are often missed by social services and resource centers that were not able to catch them. Please welcome Jaike SpottedWolf.
It's a hard word. Tachichi. I can't even say that. Tachila. It's the only word we have for I love you in Lakota, and it doesn't actually translate to I love you. It's our closest summation would be I would suffer for you. So I would go to the ends of the earth. I would fight for you. I would die for you. So that's what that collective is all about. And you did a really good job with the other pronunciations. Mostly. Wawiyatanong is how you say Detroit, where the curved waters meet. That's on Anishinaabe territory. But you got most of them, so I got to give you credit that Native names are hard, and that is a part of erasure, right? That we don't talk about Native names or Native identities in this country. A lot of people presume that we're dead or that we are thriving on reservations because of our grand casinos, and that we don't bother with whiteness out here. None of that could be more untrue. There's a lot of suffering going on. There's a lot of deprivation. A lot of reservations are resource deserts, and it's a very dehumanizing space to be on a reservation right now. So I'll start with thanking the congregation for having me and thanking you for asking me to speak. We had a moment there, we were emailing back and forth, and this isn't to pick on anybody, but to start with my talk about that we weren't gonna use that image back there because I didn't understand that it wasn't being censored. It wasn't that you guys couldn't handle it as a congregation. It took a little more investigation to learn that it's because you guys have been harassed by right-wingers and conservatives out in this area and that your safety is at risk. Once I understood that, I was very much more amenable to, we can just have this up on my presentation. We do not need to put that on the billboard outside. I didn't even know it was gonna be on the billboard. I just wanted it up somewhere. And for reasons, and those reasons I am going to give in this talk now. The United States government is not friendly to Native Americans. They never have been, and I don't see a time that there ever will be. They are currently still invested in our genocide, very, very heavily invested. So while this image might be controversial and hurt the feelings of people that have served for this country or that think that this is a great country and that this country provides for all of its citizens, this image to me is an image of freedom and of liberation from the people that have destroyed us for hundreds of years, who have systematically sought out ways to make sure that we were dead and gone in a genocide and that we never come back because they wanted our land, they wanted our resources, and there's that thing called manifest destiny in the Bible that said that this was theirs to have, that we weren't taking care of it, that we hadn't developed it, and therefore we as dumb savages should no longer be entitled to the land that we had been curating and stewarding for millennia. So I'm going to start with a little bit of history about where it really, really got bad. At one point, all the eastern nations are removed from their spaces and they've been sent to Oklahoma. Indian Removal Act, Andrew Jackson was the architect of that damage. And then now we're to the Civil War, where we have what we call the Buffalo Hunts. General Sherman had led the march in Atlanta, right? And that was said to be a pivotal battle in the Civil War that turned things for the North. So he's celebrated in a lot of history, especially by people who are abolitionists, who are like, yeah, we like freedom from enslavement. We don't want people to be enslaved anymore. But we don't talk about Sherman and how after that campaign, he was dubbed by the United States government to eradicate the Native American so that they could get the rest of the land. So I'm going to start with some history. It's going to be hard. I invite any questions after this. Please come and talk to me, and I will answer everything I can, as much as I can. General William P. Sherman and Philip Sheridan believed if the soldiers could eradicate the buffalo, the Indians would have no choice but to give up. This belief stemmed from General Sherman's tactic during the Civil War to defeat the Confederates in his march to the sea, the scorched earth policy. Take away anything essential for the survival of a people, and they will surrender. He was not wrong. One thing the Northerners and the Southerners could agree on, in as much as they couldn't agree on abolition or freed slaves, was that the Western tribes needed to be pacified, and not pacified as in we'll give them what they want and quiet them down, pacified as in eradicated, pacified as in shut down, pacified as in do not let them fight another war with us, because they had seen and experienced so many times with so many wars with so many tribes before how that went. Now the most senior member of U.S. Army, Sherman was known for using psychological warfare to bring the South to its knees. By sending Sherman west, officials hoped the United States could gain even more land and secure space for ambitious westward expansion. By the early 20th century, only 325 buffalo remained in the entire country. Nearly 3/4 of Native American population declined due to westward expansion. Between 1800 and 1890, the Native American population dropped from around 600,000, which used to be 55 million, down to just 228,000 people in the entire country. In 1877, later on, my bad. Get to the rest of the notes over here. On May 10th in 1868, Sherman contacts General Sheridan and says, as long as buffalo are up on the Republican, the Indians will go there. I think it would be wise to invite all the sportsmen there this fall for a grand buffalo hunt and make one grand sweep of them all. Until the buffalo and consequent Indians are out, the roads we will have collisions and trouble. Lieutenant General John M. Schofield, commander of the Department of Missouri from 1869 to 1870, stated in his memoirs, with my cavalry and combined artillery encampment in front, I wanted no other occupation in life than to ward off the savage and kill off his food until there should no longer be an Indian frontier in our beautiful country. He wanted nothing more than to destroy Native Americans. And that's important today because it's still true. The United States government wants nothing more than for us to be completely erased from the planet. Then their genocide project will be over. They will have the land. They will have the resources they so desperately wanted. Once gold is found on native lands, removal ideology evolves into forcing tribal nations onto reservations on an undesirable land with restricted freedoms and no rights. They are interned and live under dependency on the U.S. government for basic needs, including food, water, and health care. Naturally, Plains tribes resist removal to reservations in what is known as the area of the Indian Plains Wars. By the 1880s, all Eastern Indian nations have been moved to reservations when they are systematically excluded from the American economy and political system. We have so-called sovereignty, but we don't get to use it. We don't actually have a say. The Enbridge 3 fight was on treaty land, where Indians had said, no, we don't want your pipeline coming through this land. Dapple, Standing Rock was on treaty land, where we said, no, we don't want your pipeline, and the US government used eminent domain. We don't have a voice in politics. We don't have a true economy. In 1850, the California legislature passes the Indian Act of 1850, authorizing the arrest of vagrant natives who can be hired out to the highest bidder, enabling white people to go before a justice of the peace to obtain Indian children for indenture. We never talk about Native American slavery in this country, and there it is. There's a scalp bounty, and extermination laws are created for a class of Indian hunters. The Mexicans were in on this, but we love them still. We consider them Native Americans, and they were oppressed. So Chihuahua's Le Quinto scalp bounties set a price of $150 for live women and children, $200 for the scalps of warriors, and $250 for live warriors. This bounty would remain on the books in Chihuahua through 1886. Durango passed similar laws the same year, with Sonora following in 1850. Sonora set the price at $100 for women, we went cheap then, and children under 14. Because if you can take the women and the children, you can break the warrior. Because we were so indebted to our families, we were so invested in building our communities, and they meant everything to us. Nothing mattered outside of that. So if you could kill the women and the children, you would break the spirit of the warrior, and he would no longer be able to fight. If you took away the buffalo, which meant food, hunting, that meant shelter, that meant clothing for Plains tribes, you would take away everything they had and break their spirit, because we didn't just kill buffalo, we had a relationship with buffalo. They were our ancestors, they are our ancestors, they're our relatives. We took care of them, we hunted them in a moral way, and it was a relationship, a symbiotic one. They needed us, we needed them. They followed us where we went because we were by water and berries and the food that they needed to eat. But that didn't matter. The scalps were known. This is why the Washington Redskins thing is such an important discussion, right? People think it was because of the color of our skin that we were red. It's not. The term redskin comes from the color of blood that drips down your face after you've been scalped. Naming a team after a gruesome act like that, and then parading it around the entire America, and then saying, we will not back down, we're gonna keep our name for marketing purposes because it's too expensive to change our name, is a cruelty I can't express to you as a Native American that we had to endure when it comes to these mascots, when it comes to these schools that will not back down. Civilian soldiers, Mexican nationals, and all foreigners were eligible to Indian hunters. Many out-of-work Texas Rangers or miners in need of quick cash would supplement their income through scalp hunting. Then we have the Appropriations Act. It's to steal prime land from the Plains tribes for American settlement and to confine Indians to undesired land and restrict their movement, subdue them, and make them essentially dependent on the U.S. According to the law, Indians were under mandate for internment and prohibited from leaving reservations, even for traditional food gathering, hunting, or fishing activities. In rare cases, individuals could leave only if they were granted explicit permission. Can you imagine living on the soil you've been living on for thousands and thousands of years? This is the only land you know. You've never traveled to another continent, and you're being told, now you're moved here, and you cannot leave this space unless you ask us permission, us, the people that have destroyed you and your family and your relatives. You have to get our permission to come out of reservation spaces. In rare cases, individuals could only leave. Tribes actively resisted internment and the stealing of their lands, and U.S. history books refer to this resistance as the Plains Indian Wars. After several massacres and all-out assaults on Indian nations, the U.S. Army ultimately succeeded in relocating most Indian tribes onto reservations, opening up natives' land to settlers. During reservation confinement, the U.S. instituted a food ration and commodities diet to feed the interned, introducing wheat, flour, grease, and sugar and into American Indian diets. Starvation was common, and living in close quarters spread disease rapidly when there were outbreaks from contacts with outsiders. So we now have some of the highest diabetes rates, some of the highest obesity rates, because those rations didn't stop. We still subsist off of commodities food because there aren't economic opportunities on reservations, because again, they're resource deserts. They moved us so far away from urban spaces, that we don't communicate with other cities. We don't have that partnership with other cities you'd see from city to city in settler areas. So the economic opportunity development being as low as it is, we don't have the growth. We don't see people, especially after years and years and years of genocide, picking themselves up, dusting themselves off, getting out to college, going away, making a good income, and supporting their families. So that commodity food is what we still subsist on, and it is the lowest grade allowable by the USDA, is what is being fed to Native Americans today. Peter Hardiman Burnett, in a second State of Address, says that a war of extermination will continue to be waged between the races until the Indian race becomes extinct, and that must be expected. Burnett sets aside money to arm local militias against natives, and with the help of the U.S. Army, distributes weapons to the militias who are tasked with raiding tribal outposts and scalping and killing native people. According to the historian Benjamin Madley, about 100,000 natives in California died during the first 2 years of the gold rush alone. By 1873, only 30,000 indigenous people existed there. In 1858, Dakota Chief Little Crow, worried about the encroaching illegal settlement in Dakota lands and by white settlers, travels to Washington, D.C. to ensure that their treaties will be respected and white settlers will keep out of Dakota lands. Instead, the U.S. government takes back half of the Dakota reservation in Minnesota and opens it up to white settlement. As a result, traditional sustenance activities such as hunting and fishing are severely limited, leading to Dakota starvation and hardship. That leads us to the largest mass execution that's ever happened in this country, that was instituted by President Abraham Lincoln, the darling of the Civil War. He frees slaves, but he hates Indians. After a band of natives were caught stealing eggs to feed their family from white settlers, they were, of course, captured by a cavalry. The U.S. military promises the Dakota that if they surrender peacefully, they will be granted safety. The Dakota surrender at the Battle of Wood Lake, and hundreds of Dakota, some of whom had nothing to do with the uprising, are arrested and tried by a 5-man military commission. In many cases, trials last less than 5 minutes, and there is no due process. Most have no idea what is happening. Among 393 people, 323 are convicted of murder and other outrages, and 303 are sentenced to death by hanging. It is reported that on that day, the largest mass government execution is carried out. It ended up being 38 that were actually hung, and 2 years later, 2 more were hung. So we call it the 38 plus 2, and then there's a memorial ride every year. At the end of that trial, thousands of white settlers gather and cheer while they're executed. So that sentiment of white settlers hating us, of the government hating us, is still true today. There was a billboard out in South Dakota last year that said natives are not welcome. People don't talk about racism in native communities today. It's still very alive, very prevalent. There was a little boy in Oklahoma who had his braids cut a year and a half ago because that's not acceptable. It's considered savage. In 1862, Surgeon General William Hammond establishes the Army Medical Museum and orders all medical officers and field personnel to diligently collect and forward all specimens of morbid anatomy, surgical, or medical, which may be regarded as valuable. Our remains were being asked to be collected from battlefields to be sent to the U.S. Surgeon General. John Chivington of the Sand Creek Massacre of Northern Cheyenne cuts off the heads of mostly women and children and ships them to Washington, D.C., Army Medical Museum, in compliance with the federal call for American Indian heads and anatomy. I'm going to leave the notes and go on to modern day, because I've got, how much time left? Well, maybe I'll give you a little more history. It's uncomfortable for me, so it's got to be given to you. I've got to be, my cultural responsibility in my tribe is to be honest and tell the truth about what's going on. On January 8, 1864, 500 to 10,000 Dana, which are what you guys know as the Navajo, are forcibly removed from their homes in Arizona and New Mexico under U.S. military gunpoint and marched over 300 miles to a remote military internment camp along the Pecos River in eastern New Mexico at Bosque Redondo, Fort Sumter along the way. Over 200 Dana women, children, and elders die of starvation and exposure to the elements. Over the 4 years of internment, the U.S. Army imprisons over 10,000 Dene at the camp and keep them in holes in the ground with extremely scarce rations. Approximately 3,500 Dene die in the camp. In 2013, journalist Leah Mandelbaum noted that Adolf Hitler was inspired by the treatment for the Dene for the development of the concentration camps during World War II. He took so many notes from the United States government and applied it to the Holocaust, and people do not talk about that. I have an enrollment number. What other race in this country is given a number that they are identified by the United States government? They have an enrollment number. These two boys that sit in the front, my relatives all have an enrollment number. That was established by the United States government and studied by Hitler to eradicate the Jewish population. 1865, the 13th Amendment passes, prohibiting both slavery and involuntary servitude. The U.S. Supreme Court opts for a narrower interpretation of the 13th and 14th Amendments, focusing on African Americans and excluding Indians. For American Indians and Alaskan Natives, slavery and involuntary servitude persists through debt peonage. So we're also a part of that discussion around the 13th Amendment, but nobody is talking about it. The map of Indian Territory is entirely reconstructed after the Civil War, leaving little resemblance to territorial maps from the days before the war. Commissioner Cooley informs the Indian leaders that they had given up their annuities and lands by siding with the Confederacy, even though 4 of the 5 tribes had more warriors supporting the Union. The U.S. government justifies their stealing of the lands in Indian Territory as just punishment for the tribes for supporting the Confederacy when they signed a treaty with the Southern faction. So there's that theme over and over and over again of we said you could, the U.S. government, if you did this, the United States American Indian, and them going back on their word and changing it and gatekeeping and adding fancy language that we didn't understand, making things incomprehensible and shifting things at the last time and taking away another right over and over and over again. The Buffalo Soldiers, there's a song by Bob Marley that I think a lot of people take pride in. In 1866, all black cavalry and infantry regiments are created after Congress passes the Army Organization Act. Their main tasks are to help control the Native Americans of the plains, capture cattle rustlers and thieves, and protect settlers, stagecoaches, wagon trains, and railroad crews along the Western Front. There is a big theme of anti-indigeneity in black populations and anti-blackness in Native populations. The United States government did that very specifically, very intentionally, so that we would never rise up together to overtake the United States government. Because we tried it a couple of times and we were very, very successful. So they do things like that to pit us against each other so that there's a lesser chance at freedom and liberation. Then we've got grave robbing. On January 13th, 1868, the U.S. Army urges upon medical officers the importance of collecting for the Army Medical Museum specimens of Indian crania and of Indian weapons and utensils so far as they may be able to procure them. Every tribe I've ever run into has very sacred practices around burying their dead, around being able to go and visit their dead, the mounds that they go see. That's sacred for reasons. Those are our ancestors. We treat them with incredible respect. And the government knew that if you robbed graves and took away what was left of remains, you would again fracture that spirit and that connection that the living had with those who had walked on. 1871, Congress ends treaty making, because why would they anymore? Why would they try? Let's just do away with it altogether. And they're no longer recognized as independent nations by the federal government. According to the Indian Appropriation Act of March 3rd, 1871, moreover, Congress directs that all Indians are to be treated as individuals and legally designated wards of the federal government. A ward is what you become when you can't take care of yourself and when people have to make decisions for you. I've been a ward of the state twice in my early 20s after unresolved trauma led me to self-medicate for a long time. I did not know what was going on in my body, and it just understood psychosis. So I became a ward of the state to the state of Idaho because they said I couldn't take care of myself. They said we could not any longer take care of ourselves. And to become a ward means that they now have control over everything. In 1877, Chief Joseph and his 750 warriors outwit over 3,000 soldiers for almost 4 months across 1,400 miles, so much so that his military acumen and strategy are all still studied at West Point today. U.S. troops eventually stopped the campaign 40 miles short of the Canadian border, and Joseph surrenders under terms negotiated with General Nelson Miles via telegraph to safely allow Namiapuu to return to their homelands in Idaho. However, General Sherman ignores the terms and instead sends Joseph and his band to prison at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, and then on to Oklahoma, where they remained for 8 years as prisoners of war. So that's kind of the history. It's not even a detailed one. That's the surface of what we have experienced with the United States government and why that's a very fitting image for this talk. Current day conditions on reservations look like, I was back there in October of last year, Fort Peck. I can't live there because I am sober and because I have mental health issues. I've got anxiety, I've got PTSD. To live on my reservation, where after decades and decades and decades of our genocide, people have become so disconnected and so removed from who they are. We've lost our culture. It's only in 1978 that we were allowed to speak our language again, legally by law, that the United States government said you can do that again, to dance, to speak, to do anything that was Native American, that we had done for thousands of years. I wrote this post on September 30th about residential schools, and this is where it really, really started to dehumanize Native Americans, and this is why the conditions are what they are on reservations today. Imagine being ripped from your mother's arms by a U.S. Marshal and sometimes a BIA agent, total strangers and thrown in the back of a caravan separated from anyone you know. Imagine being taken hundreds of miles away from your home and for very many never to return. Imagine being starved by your new captors. Imagine being beaten for speaking the only language you've ever known. Imagine being renamed, your identity stolen, and told that yours was satanic and hedonistic. Imagine trying to escape only to have no way back the hundreds of miles you came, then to be beaten so severely if you do get captured that you can't walk again. Imagine being molested and raped by total strangers in the name of God. Imagine being raped, getting pregnant, and when the baby is born, having it ripped out of your arms and incinerated by a nun, or suffocated and buried in the church walls of the residential school that you now live. Imagine getting sick with malaria, pneumonia, and malnourishment, and to slowly die without your family around. Imagine being farmed out to white couples for labor after leaving their school. Imagine living through all of that and having to survive the rest of your life with any of those memories and enduring that trauma for the rest of your life. Only to have residential school deniers tell you your trauma wasn't real. Only to be subject to erasure on your own lands. Only to be vilified by racists for telling your story. And then I go on to give thanks to the ancestors. Because they knew that if you break the family apart after these wars, after these Indian wars, that if you took the children, you were taking the only thing they had left. And it crippled Native American communities. Residential school era was the beginning of the end. After that, parents didn't know who they were. They didn't know what their identity was anymore. Children didn't know who they were. They didn't know their identity anymore. So our reservations are riddled with trauma. When I was back there last year trying to save my sister's life after she almost died from endocarditis, from using a dirty needle, from her meth addiction, in the span of 3 weeks that I was there were 4 deaths under the age of 24 down to 6 months. Somebody had died when they threw themselves in front of a train. Another kid died in a car accident while he was drunk. Another kid who was 18 drowned in a river when he was drunk. And then a 6-month-old girl had been raped to death by her grandfather, and she died of a heart attack. because we have been so dehumanized and left alone for so long without resources. People are wearing windbreakers out there in November and December. In Montana, where it gets down to -20, -25, -30-degree weather. The resource chain is cut off. The commodities don't feed you. They're barely enough. And like I said, we don't get aid from the United States government. They are fine cutting us off and letting us die. We are still surviving, right? Obviously. After that 3 weeks, which was the longest I can endure, I was asked to take custody of my nephews. I did it because I knew we have to save my family. I had some time in recovery. I have had a lot of therapy. I've had a lot of trauma work that I have done and accomplished over the course of my life. I have some tools. I'm still not great, right? I'm surviving. I'm doing my best I can under the conditions, right? And in that case, I would say I am thriving, and so are they. They're gonna make it because I refuse to let the United States government take them. I refuse to let them make another decision for those boys and to eradicate us any further. This will be my job. This is now my role in my community, is to raise these children, to give them every opportunity that every white child has, to fight for land back, to make sure we are fully regarded as human beings and undo this narrative that we're doing fine on our reservations, that we're wealthy off casino money, and that women aren't dying in droves due to sex trafficking from pipeline and resource extraction projects all over the country. MMIW and the epidemic of women and children dying in this country because the United States government cannot stop taking things from the ground. It cannot stop damaging things from the ground, and it wants more and more and more, are killing our entire population. Because if you kill the women, and it's legal. There was a law passed in the 70s, Oliphant versus Snoqualmie, that says that you can't be tried on native land if you are non-native. White people know that. Sex traffickers know that. They go there because they know they won't be tried, and then it's turned over to the FBI. It's supposed to be their problem. The FBI doesn't care either. So that's why. There are reasons that people call us drunk Indians. There are reasons that people think that we're lazy and we're disaffected and that we don't care. How can we care? We can't take care of ourselves because we're not being cared for by the people who came here, who settled upon the land, who have vacation homes on the places we used to forage berries and hunt our buffalo. How do we overcome that if we don't have camaraderie and accompliceship from settler descendants? And that time is now. We're in the 7th generation. This is the time in prophecy from almost every native tribe out there that says that things are gonna turn themselves around and that now we come back in unity with people who have done the learning and sat through the education and heard what happened and choose to make it right. Choose to make decisions daily, to not let erasure take its hold like it has for so long. Educate yourselves truly, because it's not being taught in schools for a reason. They didn't talk about Kamloops, which was the day they found 215 bodies up in Canada in 2021, in May. The United States government has not said a statement in a national way about the residential schools here in America because they know they would be implicated. We got a Catholic president. He ain't gonna talk about it. It was the Catholics that started this. So educate yourselves. Ask me for resources. I'll send you A Different Mirror by Ronald Takaki has an incredible passage in there about how the United States government systematically destroyed not just Native Americans, but every other population that tried to come here that was not white and male. And there are other great books, and the sources I took from last night at 1:30 a.m., I'll give you that site too. And if you have any questions, I'm very, very open to hearing them. But please, Don't let us die in our erasure. We are still here. We are still strong. These are some of the best athletes you will ever see play a game. Like, I would welcome you to take them on in a game of basketball and soccer and watch them kick your holy ass. And I say that with a lot of love and respect because it's true. I've never seen kids more capable, more smart, more brilliant, right? And they would have died out there. I know it. I know it because I know what my family is going through right now. So thank you for giving me this time. Heavy talk, yes. Go, everybody get a spa treatment after this. I won't be able to because I'm still living in poverty, but I thank you. Thank you for giving us this space.
Thank you so much, Jake, for bringing us all that amazing and sad information and historical context. And I want to say, generational trauma is real. And, it's hard to break that when hundreds of years of trauma have been happening, especially to specific groups over and over and over again. So I really appreciate that you were here today and gave us this talk. So. For Joys and Sorrows, our reading comes from Reverend Scott Taylor, Love's Many Shapes. In this space carved out by our quiet connection, we give thanks for the many forms of love that have formed us. The love of family that brings us into being, allows us to bloom, and then sends us on our way with the reminder that we can return no matter what. The love of partnered hearts that teach us to trust and help us know that who we are does not end at the barrier of our skin. The love of friends who help us feel seen and sing our song back to us when we cannot hear it with our ears alone. The love of community that bathes us in belonging and calls us to see the needs of others as our own. And the greatest love, the love that will not let us go, even in fear, even in failure, even when we are lonely or lost. Love invites us home, friends. If we listen, it is doing so even today. You are welcome to come and pick up a stone or stones from the table, infuse or charge it with your joy or sorrow, and place it in the singing bowl, where its energy will ripple out to be held by all of us. If you'd like to verbally share something important on your heart, please come up and speak directly into the microphone. All are welcome to participate in any of these ways. one for the sorrows, and one for the strength of the gathered community that can support you and bring you peace. For the gifts which we have received and the gifts which we are, may we be truly grateful. May we be committed to using these gifts to make a difference in the world, to increase love and justice, to decrease hatred and oppression, to expand beloved community, to share and keep sharing as long as we can. You are now invited to participate in the blessing of giving as the ushers come among you to accept the gifts of the congregation. You may also give online via the QR code on the back of the order of service. Thank you. Please join me in reciting the offertory blessing that can be found in your order of service. To the work, creating beloved community within and beyond these walls, we dedicate ourselves and our offerings. Please rise as you are willing and able to sing our hymn from the gray hymnal, number 301, Touch the Earth, Reach the Sky.
Over the land, our faithful
Listening That Leads by Reverend Joe Cleveland. May we be a people of deep listening, committed listening, a listening that leads to healing, a listening that leads to wholeheartedness, a listening that helps us grow in compassion, a listening that helps you discern an action for justice making that you can make, a listening that nurtures the self-change. May you find your practice of listening to be a blessing for yourself. May your listening be a blessing to others. Listen.